The phrase separation of church and state is one of the most misunderstood ideas in American history. Ask most people today, and they'll tell you it's in the Constitution. Teachers say it, politicians say it, judges say it, but here's the truth. Those words are nowhere in the Constitution. The founders didn't write them, Congress never ratified them, the states never voted on them. What the Constitution actually says is this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's the entire religious clause in the First Amendment. Nothing about a wall, nothing about kicking God out of public life. So how did we go from protecting the free exercise of faith to banning prayer in schools, lawsuits over nativity scenes, and tearing the Ten Commandments out of courthouses? Well, to answer that, we've got to go back to the words of the founders, the state constitutions, and a single private letter that's gotten twisted by the left beyond recognition. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band,
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not one small step for man.
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
The infamous separation line came not from the Constitution, but a letter by Thomas Jefferson. He wrote it in 1802 to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut. The Baptists were worried. In their state, the Congregational Church was still recognized as the official church, and they wanted assurances that the new government wouldn't meddle in their worship or pick favorites amongst the denominations. Jefferson wrote back to calm them down. And he said the First Amendment built a wall of separation between the church and state. But here's the key. Jefferson was talking about a wall that kept government out of the church. He was telling the Baptists, don't worry, Washington has no authority to interfere in your faith. It was never meant to be a weapon to drive faith out of government or public life. Jefferson himself regularly attended Christian worship services held at the U.S. Capitol building. He even authorized public funds for missionaries to native tribes. That doesn't sound like a man trying to purge Christianity from the government, right? The founding fathers were far from secularists. The founding fathers openly declared religion and morality as essential to the survival of the republic. I mean, George Washington, in his farewell address in 1796, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. He even went further. Reason and experience both forbid us to accept that national morality can prevail in exclusion from religious principles. John Adams in 1798, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Benjamin Franklin, often portrayed as a skeptic, rose during the Constitutional Convention and urged the delegates to pray. God governs in the affairs of man, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? And James Madison, the so-called father of the Constitution, regularly attended Christian services in Congress's chambers and supported public chaplains for the House and Senate. These men didn't believe religion should be separate or hidden or private. Okay, they believed it was the foundation of liberty. So let's talk a little bit about the religion in the constitutions, right? If you want real proof that what the founders intended, look at the state constitutions written at the same time. Delaware's Constitution from 1776 required all office holders to declare belief in God, Jesus Christ, and the divine inspiration of Scripture. Maryland's Constitution from 1776 required belief in a Christian religion to hold office. Massachusetts Constitution from 1780, written by John Adams, it required public officials to swear to support the Christian faith. And the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, passed by the same Congress that drafted the Constitution, declared religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and to the happiness of mankind, schools, and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Clearly, these documents weren't trying to build a secular republic. They were affirming that faith was woven into public life. And here's some real examples of the church in government. They had worship in the Capitol. In the 1800s, the U.S. Capitol building, when it was first opened, Congress authorized the House chambers for Christian worship services. Every Sunday, benches and chairs were rearranged, chaplains and ministers preached, and the room was filled with citizens, congressmen, and even presidents. Thomas Jefferson, the same guy who wrote that letter that got twisted into separation, attended church services at the Capitol nearly every week during his presidency. He even had the Marine Band play hymns for the services. And James Madison also attended these services at the Capitol as president, knowing that even the so-called showing that even the so-called father of the Constitution saw no conflict between faith and government buildings. They had chaplains in Congress. From the very first Congress in 1789, lawmakers voted to have chaplains both in the House and the Senate. These weren't ceremonial positions. Chaplains led prayers, provided counsel, and sometimes preached sermons right inside those chambers. That tradition continues today. Congress still opens each session with prayer, a practice challenged in the court, but repeatedly upheld as constitutional because the founders themselves started it. The Supreme Court. In the early years, the Supreme Court met inside the Capitol. And when it was not in session, the courtroom room was used for those Christian services. So literally, America's highest court was hosting church services under the same roof where justice decided cases. Presidential proclamations started with George Washington. And presidents regularly used proclamations calling for the National Day of Prayer, fasting, and Thanksgiving. Washington's first Thanksgiving proclamation in 1789 credited God with America's blessing and urged citizens to give thanks. Again, John Adams, James Mason, and many others followed suit. Far from separating religion from politics, they wove it into the civics calendar. And the schools had Bibles in them. For much of the U.S. early history, public schools used the Bible as a primary textbook. And it wasn't seen as an intrusion of church into state. It was considered the foundation of moral education. In the Northwest Ordinance, again, it says religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government, schools, and by the means of education, shall be forever encouraged. I think it was John Jay. I can't remember who it was. But he's the one who said, we need to, in schools, teach kids to serve God, serve their country, serve their family. Or love God, love their country, love their family. Why was country before family? Well, he said that it was because if they come for your country, they're going to come for your family. So you serve God first, then you serve your country, then you serve your family. And I find it really interesting that that's the one thing that they're trying to take, that they took out of schools. They took God out of schools. Anyway, so how did this separation get twisted? How did we get here? For over a century after the founding, nobody thought the First Amendment meant religion had to be scrubbed from public life. Presidents proclaimed days of prayer and Thanksgiving. Congress, again, hired chaplains. Schools taught the Bible as part of normal education. I actually went and saw part of Glenn Beck's American Journey Experience, and they had a book in there that was for kids in school, and they learned the alphabet by teaching them scripture from the Bible and Bible characters. That was required in all Bibles and all schools in the country. Anyway, this shift began in the mid 20th century. In 1947, the Supreme Court case Eversons versus the Board of Education dragged Jefferson's private letter to the center of constitutional law. And for the first time, the court said the First Amendment created a wall of separation between church and state. That phrase, ripped from the context, became the new standard. And from there, court rulings banned school prayer, which was Engel versus Vitale in 1962, removed Bible readings from classrooms, Abington versus Shemp in 1963, and treated public displays of the Ten Commandments as violations. The founders' intent, freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, was turned upside down. The founders didn't build a wall to keep faith out. They built a republic where faith was welcomed in, from worship services in the Capitol to chaplains in Congress, from the presidential proclamations to Bible readings in school. The First Amendment didn't erase God from public life. It stopped the government from picking one denomination over another. guaranteeing every American had the right to live and practice their faith. And I appreciate you sitting here and listening to me. Remember, history isn't boring, especially when presidents worshiped in the Capitol, Congress hired chaplains, and the Supreme Court doubled as a church. See you next time.